Welcome to this e-lecture, which will be about statistical analysis. What is statistical analysis really all about? That is the subject of this e-lecture. So, first and foremost, statistical analysis is about analyzing variation. So we are into looking at variation. When properties do not vary, quantitative analysis is very simple and uninteresting. All units have identical properties. They are all men, or they have the same age, they have the same or the same social background. So they are pretty much everyone is the same. But usually properties or characteristics vary between individuals. For example, some individuals are more trusting than others, some think the best of everyone, some are scarcely able to trust anyone. So there is variation that we can describe and explain. We can study why do we observe this variation? What caused this variation to be? And we can describe and explain that variation. Which individuals are more trusting than others? Why do some individuals think the best of everyone, while others are scarcely able to trust anyone? That's really, if we're into trust, if we're into to explaining the social phenomenon trust, we are really into that. Or it can be other social phenomenon that we are interested in explaining. So, and it's also important to know that analysis is simplification or reduction of data. We lose detailed information because analysis is simplification, but we gain the general view, the broad lines. We no longer see the trees, but we gain a better view of the wood, so to speak. So it's really, that's also an important to know that this is analysis. When we do analysis, we have to make simplifications and reduce data or reduce the details really. We have different types of quantitative analysis, and these different types, we can separate according to the number of variables. If you have a univariate analysis, we describe the distribution of a single variable. If we have a bivariate analysis, we describe the relationship between two variables. And we have multivariate analysis, where we describe the relations or the correlations between the dependent variables and a set of independent variables. And we can separate between descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. Descriptive statistics is the distribution or relationship in the data, whereas inferential is about generalizations from a sample to a population. And then we often talk about confidence intervals and hypothesis testing. And the confidence intervals is really when you make estimation for a population based on a sample, that estimation is always there's always a bit of uncertainty about that estimation. So you put a confidence interval around that estimation, and that's to show that the true value in the population can be from this level to this level. So that's the confidence interval. And hypothesis testing is all about, okay, are men or women more trusting are men more trusting than women, or are women more trusting than men? You can have this hypothesis in the population. You can have this hypothesis about the population, and then you can test this hypothesis based on your sample. And then you do, of course, generalization from the sample to the population. And then you have description or explanation. Descriptive statistics is to establish distributions of variables or statistical correlation between variables. But explanation is to establish the causal relationship between variables, and that's about, okay, is A the cause to B? Is there a cause and effect relationship between these variables? So that's about explanation. Mostly we do descriptive analysis. We look at the correlation between variables, and we might want to say that there is a causal relationship, but often that is very hard to do. And we can talk about variation and correlation between variables. Often we want to investigate if any properties vary depending on variation in other properties. Are older people less trusting than younger people? Are those living in cities less trusting than those living in the countryside? Are residents in Norway more trusting than other Europeans? So we want to explain variation in a variable with variation in one or more other variables. And in the wide sense, that's the ability to predict the value of one variable given knowledge of the values on one or more other variables. So we want to say that if you are a man, you live in this and this part of Norway, you have this and this age, you have this and level of education, well, we predict your value on this and this variable, for example, income, to be this or that. So we want to predict what is the value on the dependent variable given knowledge on different independent variables. And in a narrow sense, it's the ability to demonstrate that the variable is causally affected by one or several other variables. So we talk about the dependent and the independent variable. Well, the dependent variables is the property that we want to describe or explain. So we want to explain the variation or describe the variation or explain the variation in a dependent variable, and the independent variable is the one we use to examine whether the dependent variable varies in correlation with variation in one or more independent variables. So does these independent variable are they correlated with variation in the dependent variable, or do they cause a variation in the dependent variable? So let's show how this is what this is all about. Our goal really when we want to explain variation. So we can put this up in an equation, or we can say we can state our goal in an equation. So our goal is to explain variation. We want to be able to say why there is variation across cases. If trust are cases are individuals, for example, and why do trust or income, health, level of education differ from case to case? That's really the question. So in this equation, y is our dependent variable. It's the phenomenon we want to explain, whereas f is the function, or and that's the form or the shape of the relationship between y, which is the dependent variable, and x, which is the independent variable. And the independent variable, that's the phenomenon we want to a phenomenon that makes it possible to predict variation in y, so it's the independent variable. And there are other things that causes variation in y that we do not than the x's that we include in our model, and that's different types of error in the model, sampling error, randomization error, measurement error, and perceptual error. So there are different errors that cause variation in the dependent variable that we do not include in our model. That's also important to keep in mind. So example, if for example our research question is, are people in a relationship more trusting in others than singles? Well, then trust would be our dependent variable. Whether you are a couple or not would be our independent variable. And of course we would have other things that explains the variations in trust, which is in our error term. So the results could be no, but there is a difference according to blah 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 blah, or these and these and these factors. But also there are other factors that determine the level of trust among individuals than we have been able to include in our model, and those are represented by the error term. So okay, that was the e-lecture about statistical analysis. Thank you.